In 2022, Henry Winkler was a cast member on the Israeli television show Chanchi, about a Jewish woman from New York who leaves her observant religious family for the secular pleasures of Israel. And he has been effusive in his praise of Israel since then. It is understandable that he would feel that way. He is a Jewish man who lost family members to a genocide. But the state of Israel would not exist without the murder and displacement of Palestinians. It is an ethno-nationalist state that actively denies Palestinians basic human rights, like clean water and electricity. American police go there to learn new and extra dangerous ways to hurt people. As anyone who has been keeping an eye on the website formerly known as Twitter knows, there are powerful people who will prop up anti-Semitic conspiracy theories while also defending Israel's human rights abuses against Palestinians, as if that makes it okay. We have hesitated to bring this up because it didn't seem relevant to the topic of this podcast. But given how central to the show Henry Winkler is, and how much we praise his performance, it seems disingenuous to overlook this entirely at a time when human rights abuses against the Palestinian people are skyrocketing, in Palestine and abroad. Near my hometown of Chicago, a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy was killed by his landlord just last month. Please, call your representatives and ask for a ceasefire. Donate to Doctors Without Borders or Islamic Relief USA or the AFSC's Gaza Fund if you can. Learn more about boycott, divestment, and sanction, the Palestinian-led peaceful movement to pressure Israel to meet the bare minimum in how it treats Palestinians, and look into local protests in support of Palestine. None of us are free until all of us are free. Thank you for listening.
Main event of the evening.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we are discussing the 14th episode of the final season of Happy Days, Fonzie Moves Out.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Fonzie Moves Out.
Fonzie is on a date with a diner waitress in his apartment. She thinks he's lying about being a teacher and a mechanic and a restaurant owner, but Fonzie insists it's all true.
I'm also a member of the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, how do you do all that stuff?
I budget my time and have a very good breakfast.
She asks why he lives over a garage then, and he says he lives over his family. Two women enter, Joyce James, a real estate agent, and Mrs. Watson, who may be buying the house.
This room over the garage could be used as a sewing nook, or with a little work, someone could actually live here.
Joyce asks if Fonzie is the tenant, which he does not like. Nor does he like that the Cunninghams are selling their house without telling him. Hearing that Mr. Cunningham said something about his business, Fonzie goes downstairs.
This could mean he's broke. All right, you stay right here. I'll be right back.
Howard and Marion don't need the money that Fonzie offers. They would have told him sooner, but he was out of town. At a convention, Howard met the president of Top Value Hardware, and the president wants Howard to be vice president of the entire chain. He's going to work at the home office in New York.
Well, we're moving on now. We're moving on up to a deluxe apartment in the sky.
The revelation causes Fonzie to collapse on the couch. Getting up, Fonzie calls Joni downstairs from the shower. She already knew, and although she'll miss her parents, they were so excited she has to be happy for them. Plus, she has a place of her own. Howard and Marion haven't decided for sure yet.
We told the real estate lady it was definite just because Howard says it makes the bums work harder.
But Fonzie is still badly shaken. He's not helped when Howard suggests he find a place of his own. Howard and Marion are called outside by Joyce, leaving Fonzie alone with his thoughts. Why is everyone deserting him? That night at Arnold's, Roger suggests Fonzie move in with him. Fonzie doesn't want to, because he's afraid he'd kill Roger, and then Roger would be dead and Fonzie would be unhappy. Chachi suggests Fonzie move into Kahuna Village,
where the fun never sets.
Kahuna Village.
a hot singles place. They have Saturday night luau's. Fonzie only decides to check it out because otherwise he'd have to move in with Roger. The next day, Fonzie has just completed a tour of Kahuna Village and attracted a gaggle of women who threaten to move out if he doesn't move in. The landlord is annoyed because one of them is his wife. Nevertheless, he offers to not check Fonzie's references and not make him pay rent for the first 2 months.
See, now you're talking sense. I can relax now. I'll sit down.
Howard and Marion show up, not to tell Fonzie that they aren't moving and want him back, but because Chachi told them Fonzie needed references. The landlord leers at Marion,
Are you the landlord?
You got it, sweetheart.
who awkwardly begins describing Fonzie's skill at fixing things, and Fonzie interrupts, accusing Howard and Marion of wanting him out. He declares he's going to sign the lease now, and leaves with the landlord. Marion wonders what upset him so much, and Howard says they've lost a tenant and a friend.
I think we've not only lost a tenant, we've lost a friend.
Fonzie packs up his apartment that night, talking to his James Dean poster as he does so.
Take a last look around.
Chachi stops by to tell Fonzie he can't leave like this, with all these bad feelings towards the Cunninghams. Fonzie won't hear it, and to prove his point, throws away his picture of the Cunninghams. Downstairs, Howard is preparing to sign his contract with Top Value Hardware when the doorbell rings. Marion rushes to get it. You can't sign a contract when someone is at the door. Chachi has come to tell Howard and Marion that Fonzie will be gone in 5 minutes, and if they don't do something now, they'll never see him again. Howard thinks they've done enough. They tried to help Fonzie, he turned on them, and he's a grown man. If he wants to act this way, there's nothing they can do about it. He almost immediately changes his mind, and he and Marion go upstairs. They arrive when Fonzie is emptying his fridge.
Hey, I wonder what this used to be.
He's sullen with them, and Marion asks why. Did Fonzie think they would stay here forever? As a matter of fact, yes he did. Howard says that 6 years ago, this was the right place for Fonzie, but times have changed. Fonzie says that 6 years ago, he moved in, and the Cunninghams were nice to him and took care of him, and then Fonzie needed them to be nice to him and take care of him. Howard says there's nothing wrong with needing people, but there is for Fonzie. Every time he needs someone, they leave him. Ashley, Heather, Richie, his parents, and now Howard and Marion. Even the Braves are moving to Atlanta.
You're wrong.
No, I'm not. I read it in the newspaper.
Marion says that Fonzie is wrong. Being a family doesn't mean that Fonzie has to live over their garage forever. Family means they can leave the city, but they can't leave your life. Family means that if the phone rings, and Fonzie says, I need you, the Cunninghams are getting on the next plane. Howard asks if Fonzie can imagine a time when he needs them and they aren't there. Fonzie says the Cunninghams aren't his second family. They're his first. He belatedly congratulates them on the move, and goes to get champagne and the papers. Alone in the apartment, Howard says Marion seems nervous about this, and reassures her with talk of the wonderful things in New York. But Marion has realized something. Maybe they're happy here in Milwaukee.
Maybe we're happy here.
Happy? You really think so?
They have home, and friends, and each other, and that's enough. They don't really need the money. What could they buy that would make them happier? When Fonzie comes back, Howard rips the contract in half. Marion suggests Fonzie put his stuff back, but Fonzie has taken their words to heart. It won't be the same without him, but can they imagine a time when he won't be there for them? Howard begins to cry, because the Braves are moving to Atlanta. A few days later, Howard and Marion visit Fonzie in his new apartment. They brought him dinner, but Fonzie doesn't have much of an appetite. His sexy lady neighbors keep bringing him food.
This is certainly delicious. And the food looks very good, too.
Thank you, Peter. That was Fonzie Moves Out. It first aired back on May 1st, 1984. Happy Days followed a new follow-ups, Bleeps and Blunders. In this episode, actress Carol Wayne drops by for a guest appearance. And there are film outtakes featuring Dom DeLuise and Dean Martin. The producers of follow-ups, Bleeps and Blunders had just gotten the news that their show was renewed for a second season. CBS had a new episode of The American Parade with Charles Kuralt. This one features a report about the U.S. Information Agency, a government agency founded in 1953 by Dwight Eisenhower and devoted to public diplomacy. CBS came in third for the hour with that.
Oh, there's a big surprise. That's an incredible. I think I'm going to have a heart attack and die from that surprise.
And NBC won the hour with another rerun of The A-Team, in which a contractor is being threatened by competitors who want to stop his demolition project. So, Peter, of those three choices, what are you watching?
I'm going to assume that I've seen that episode of The A-Team before, and I'm going to watch Follow-Ups, Bleeps, and Blunders.
I'm watching Follow-Ups, Bleeps, and Blunders as well, mainly because of my interest in Carol Wayne. Fonzie Moves Out was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Nancy Chernin, who had previously written The Other Guy in season 9. She is the cousin of Happy Days writer-producer Lowell Gans, and today she's a very prolific children's author. As for guest stars this week, let's start with Maggie Roswell as Joyce James, the real estate agent.
Joyce James, time to real estate? You must be the tenant.
Maggie is an actress and comedian from Los Angeles who is best known for her voice work on The Simpsons. Her characters include Miss Hoover, Maude Flanders, Helen Lovejoy, and Luann Van Houten.
I love having to steal clothes from the church donation box.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
She's also done voices on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Tailspin, Animaniacs, Tiny Toon Adventures, and more. Maggie's live-action work includes such movies as Pretty in Pink, Switchback, and Lost in America, plus TV shows like MASH, Murphy Brown, and Quantum Leap. Gary Marshall must have really liked Maggie Roswell, since she also guest starred on Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy. Peter, what did you think of Maggie Roswell as Joyce James, our real estate agent?
I love how perky and two-faced she is. She's nice and smiley to everyone, while simultaneously talking shit about them behind their backs, and in Fonzie's case, kind of to his face. Like how she just calls him the tenant, even though she's showing his apartment to a potential buyer while he's still there. And when she talks to Howard and Marion without Mrs. Watson there, she calls Mrs. Watson a sucker. So that was very fun.
Maggie Roswell specializes in playing characters who are outwardly cheery and sweet, but have this undercurrent of meanness and menace, and that's what she brings to Happy Days. It was kind of surreal to hear the voice of Maud Flanders on Happy Days. You know, I just didn't expect it. She walks in the room and she talks in that perfect Maud Flanders voice. We also have Stanley Brock as Mr. Turtletaub, mysteriously identified as Maki Maki in the credits.
I don't have to check your references. And the first 2 months' rent are free.
Stanley was a very prolific character actor from Brooklyn who played a lot of grouchy cops, landlords, and neighbors over the years. He's best known to modern audiences as Uncle Harvey from the movie UHF.
Forget about it. They can't even find anybody to manage the place anymore.
Stanley had dozens of film and TV credits from the 1960s to the 1990s. His TV credits include The A-Team, Murder, She Wrote, Quantum Leap, Charlie's Angels, Chips, Night Court, Welcome Back Kotter, Barney Miller, and much, much more. His movies include Love at First Bite, Night of the Comet, Amazon Women on the Moon, My Favorite Year, Life Stinks, Tin Men, and Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. Sadly, he died of a heart attack at the age of 59 in 1991. Peter, what did you think of Stanley Brock as Mr. Turtletaub?
He has big Don Knotts and Three's Company energy. He runs a singles complex where he's noticeably older than everyone we see. Apparently he's married, but based on his sartorial choices, namely the Hawaiian shirt and the shorts, you get the sense that he's kind of trying to chase his youth. And also the fact that he kind of hits on Marion when she's there, even though her husband is with her, and even though he is also married. Given that his wife was apparently herself kind of chasing after Fonzie, I guess we can assume that their marriage is not long for this world, let's be honest.
Stanley Brock is one of these classic sitcom character actors who seemingly was put on this earth to play cranky landlords and things like that. I think if Happy Days had continued for a 12th season, Mr. Turtletaub probably would have been a regular character on the show. Any idea why they call him Maki Maki in the credits?
I guess because he runs the Kahuna Village. That's what he makes people call him, to keep with the Hawaiian theme, even though he's the whitest guy I've ever seen.
Fonzie doesn't even get his name right all the time. Fonzie calls him Turtleneck and other things.
Hey, Turtleneck, take me to your office.
We also have Ann Gillespie as Sharon, the diner waitress.
Until you walked into that diner, I hated my job.
Yeah.
Ann is a TV actress with many credits from the 80s to the 2000s. Viewers might remember her best as Jackie Taylor on Beverly Hills 90210. A role she even reprised in the late 2000s reboot. She also did a long run on the soap opera Ryan's Hope and was in several of the made-for-TV Gambler movies starring Kenny Rogers. Ann's other TV credits include Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Gilmore Girls, and much more. In the 2000s, she left acting to become an Episcopal priest. Peter, what did you think of Ann Gillespie as Sharon?
Sharon is basically just there to be yet another one of Fonzie's many one-off girlfriends, but I do like that they gave her the quirk of the fact that even when she's not on the clock, she's automatically acting like a waitress, serving Fonzie coffee, getting upset that he doesn't leave her a tip, that sort of thing.
And I can forget about being a waitress. More coffee?
It's small, but it's something, and it helps to make her more memorable than she otherwise would have been.
Another memorable trait of Sharon is that she at least questions some of Fonzie's stories. A lot of Fonzie's girlfriends of the week are so awestruck by him that they wouldn't dare question anything he says. So it's interesting to me that she at least has some skepticism about all of Fonzie's claims.
And she finds it weird that he lives over a garage, because she doesn't know that Fonzie has deep-seated attachment issues and he's adopted the Cunninghams as his new family.
Jerry Paris's daughter, Julie, appears as Anne, the girl who insists that Fonzie move into Kahuna Village.
If he doesn't move in, we're moving out. Right, girls? Right!
We previously saw her in the episode Prisoner of Love back in season 10. She made cameos in many of Gary Marshall's movies. Peter, any thoughts on Jerry Paris's daughter, Julie, as Anne?
She basically only has the one line, but it's a memorable one at least.
A lot of the cast and crew members have their family on the show. It shows you that it's a nice enough place where you'd want to bring your family.
Even if they're playing a role that requires them to really want to bang the fawns.
As for songs this week, Henry Winkler sings the Top Value Hardware jingle.
Our parts never rust.
Like the chain itself, this ad campaign is fictional. Howard and Fonzie debate the merits of the jingle.
Yeah, isn't that the greatest jingle, huh? Oh, it's okay.
Unlike most jingles, I do not remember this one at all, which I guess is a sign that it's not a very good jingle.
Near the end of the episode, Howard says, "New York is a heck of a town," to which Marion replies, "The Bronx is up and the battery's down." They're referring to the song New York, New York from the 1949 film On the Town.
New York, a wonderful town. The Bronx is up and the battery's down. The people
right in the hole in the ground.
where it's famously performed by Gene Kelly, Frank Sinatra, and Jules Munchin.
Munchin, the big bopper of their trio.
The song was written by Leonard Bernstein with lyrics by Betty Comden and Adolph Green. Has it been overshadowed by that other song called New York, New York, also performed by Frank Sinatra?
Surprisingly, no. They're about equally famous. New York, New York got parodied on The Simpsons as Springfield, Springfield when Bart and Milhouse were on a squishy binge.
Springfield, Springfield, Springfield. New York is that way, man.
As for cultural and historical references this week, the real estate agent is named Joyce James. This is presumably a cute reference to Irish novelist and poet James Joyce, renowned for such works as Finnegan's Wake, Ulysses, Dubliners, and A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Unfortunately, he died of a perforated ulcer in 1941 at the age of 58.
I'm not sure why she's named after James Joyce. There doesn't seem to be any real reason for that other than that it's cute. I just feel like if you're going to name a character after someone else, there should be some sort of thematic reason why, but that's just me.
Howard attends a metric conversion seminar. Unlike the rest of the world, America still uses a curious combination of English and Dutch units of measurement. There have been many, many efforts to convert America to the metric system since the 1800s, and it even became the law of the land in 1975, but it has never really taken hold in America. Peter, where do you stand on the issue of metric conversion?
I barely understand measurements at all. I think it might be the autism. So, honestly, we might as well make the switch. The rest of the world has too.
There was a very funny sketch on Saturday Night Live a few weeks ago with Nate Bargatze as George Washington during the Revolutionary War, saying that he was fighting for the American way of life, including our own system of weights and measurements.
We'll measure weights in pounds, and that 2,000 pounds shall be called a ton.
And what would 1,000 pounds be called, sir?
Nothing.
Definitely check that out on YouTube if you haven't seen it yet. When Fonzie thinks the Cunninghams are just moving to a nicer neighborhood, he mentions Pfister Heights up on the hill. There is no such neighborhood in Milwaukee or anywhere else that I can see, but it shows that Happy Days is still using the name Pfister for just about everything. Every time I hear a Pfister on Happy Days, I keep wondering, is this the last Pfister?
I've been watching a lot of Curtis Connor videos lately, so this time when I heard the word Pfister in this episode, I said to myself, Pfister, I hardly know her. I tried not to do that last season because one of the Pfisters was a child, and that's gross. But since in this case, she's not here anymore, so I can make all the Pfister jokes I want.
Fonzie moves into Kahuna Village, a Hawaiian-themed apartment complex for singles. Kahuna is a Hawaiian word for shaman or wise man. It has become a slang term for anyone of great importance.
Big Kahuna Burger.
Big Kahuna Burger. That's that Hawaiian burger joint.
We get references to tiki torches, palm trees, and luau's in this episode. Is this the peak of Happy Days' faux Polynesian references?
I think so, yeah. Part of me is wondering how common places like Kahuna Village were, and then another part of me is like, they were probably so common, because that was very trendy in the era.
There is an establishing shot of Kahuna Village in this episode that, if you think about this being 1960s Wisconsin, is completely ridiculous.
Wisconsin gets so cold in the winter. This place is going to look ridiculous when it starts snowing.
We again see the poster of James Dean in Fonzie's apartment.
Hey, Jimmy Dean, Jimmy, James.
Again, this was taken by photographer Roy Schatt on Christmas Day, 1954. The thing that's interesting about this is that there are many photographs of James Dean. He was a very photogenic guy. And the one that they chose for the poster on Happy Days might be one of the least flattering photos of James Dean in existence. He has this kind of confused / stunned expression on his face. And I was like, of all the photos, there's so many photos of him looking cool, and that's the one you chose? Okay. Fonzie says, you know what they say, you own stuff and it owns you. This proves that this idea was around long before novelist Chuck Palahniuk used it in his 1996 novel Fight Club, or before Brad Pitt said it in the 1999 film adaptation of Fight Club.
Things you own end up owning you.
It does sound like very basic self-help stuff, so my gut is telling me that it could have been from the 1970s. That was a very self-help-oriented period.
Fonzie also mentions the Milwaukee Braves moving to Atlanta.
Well, I went to one Braves game and I found out they're moving to Atlanta.
The Major League Baseball team played its final season in Milwaukee in 1965 after years of dwindling fan support. The state of Wisconsin and the city of Milwaukee tried to hold on to the Braves and took the new owners to court to stop the sale, but their efforts were in vain. The Braves played their first season in Atlanta in 1966. Fonzie calls New York the big road apple.
Whoa, all the way to New York, that big road apple.
New York City acquired the nickname the Big Apple in the 1920s, sports writer John J. Fitzgerald coined the term to refer to the big money prizes awarded at the city's horse racing tracks. The term road apple refers to horse feces left in the road.
God.
Howard mentions going to Coney Island.
We can go to Coney Island and have a hot dog.
This iconic Brooklyn neighborhood was once an island, but the Coney Island Creek was filled in during the 1920s and 30s, so Coney Island is now a peninsula. The neighborhood became famous for its amusement parks, but these declined in popularity after World War II. There have been revitalization efforts in recent decades, however. Peter, if you were in Brooklyn, would you visit Coney Island?
Yeah, because I've heard about Coney dogs, and I want to try one so I can see how they compare to Chicago style. I'm sure that out of patriotism, I would say that even if they are good, they're not as good as Chicago style.
Marion says she and Howard are going to watch Candid Camera. She mentions the episode with the talking mailbox.
We wanted to be home to watch Candid Camera. They're going to run that one about the talking mailboxes.
Oh, I love that one.
Candid Camera is a very long-running hidden camera prank show created by Alan Funt that ran on television in various incarnations from 1948 to 2014. Hiding a speaker inside a mailbox and having it, quote-unquote, talk to passersby was one of the show's classic pranks. They repeated it several times.
There is nothing so ridiculous that somebody won't believe it. A talking mailbox 30 years ago fooled adults. 20 years ago, it was used by the post office to promote zip codes. And now we're going to do it with kids.
Other observations this week. We see the trophy that Fonzie won in A Little Case of Revenge. Nice to see that he held on to it. Did you notice the trophy?
I did. I was very glad to see that.
And it's held up well. Chachi is obviously still dealing with food insecurity issues. Did you pick up on that at all in this episode?
At one point, he wonders where he'll eat if the Cunninghams leave Milwaukee. At this point, I almost feel bad for him. I'm just sort of sad. What is he doing with his life? He's just slowly starving to death, doing nothing all day. I think Chachi might have serious issues.
Chachi's life is in a tailspin in season 11, which makes it all the more surprising what he does at the end of the run here.
I will say that Chachi is slightly more tolerable than usual in this episode because mostly he's just focused on helping Fonzie and the Cunninghams reconcile, which is nice.
I actually kind of like this pathetic, down in his luck Chachi better than the old version of Chachi.
Oh my god, he's become the new Potsy.
Can't you see what's happened? I've become George.
So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in Fonzie Moves Out?
I really love the purple button-down shirt that Marion is wearing at the end of the episode. It reminds me of a similar purple button-down shirt that Diane wore a lot on the earlier episodes of Cheers. We've also talked about Mr. Turtletop's Hawaiian getup, which will not be practical in the American Midwest come the cold seasons.
I also noticed that Mr. Turtletop was wearing some very short shorts in this episode, so we see way more of his thighs than I was expecting.
Who wears short shorts? We wear short shorts.
Peter, did you have any other observations you wanted to make about Fonzie Moves Out?
One of the women who brings Fonzie dinner at the end, there are 3 of them, and one of them is black. Given that this is set in the 1960s, that's pretty progressive. It's nice that despite Milwaukee's troubled history with race relations, it's nice that Kahuna Village is integrated. While it is nice to have black characters show up and not have their blackness called attention to by the narrative, there's also the fact that this is the 1950s/1960s. The fact that they are black would have been a lot more called attention to in universe. Like, I'm thinking of the episode where Grandpa Cunningham shows up, and it ends with him starting a band with a bunch of old guys that he met at the retirement home, and many of them are black, which is anachronistic given that that was Milwaukee in the 1950s. And there's also the episode where we meet a young basketball player who is epileptic. He is black, and as we mentioned back when we covered that episode, if your life was difficult because you had epilepsy in the 1950s, it would have been even more difficult if you were a black person with epilepsy.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Yes. In the past, I have expressed my fondness for episodes that confirm that the Cunninghams are, for all intents and purposes, Fonzie's family. That he's basically a stray cat that they picked up who refuses to leave their house and eats all of their food. And on the bright side, sometimes he's good around the house. And a lot of this episode is very funny to me because Fonzie is just slowly having a breakdown because once again, his family is abandoning him, and Howard and Marion don't really seem to understand it until the end that this is once again fodder for Fonzie's very intense abandonment issues. I did find their little heart-to-heart with Fonzie at the end to be very sweet, and even the Full House music in the background wasn't enough to ruin it for me.
They haven't abused the slow, sad, sentimental music this season the way they have in previous seasons, so I was appreciative of that. This is both a funny story about Fonzie moving into a gimmicky singles complex and a heartfelt story about his connection to the Cunninghams and how even Howard and Marion may not understand how much Fonzie depends on them in various ways. I think at this point, when the series is coming to an end, it was important to put that relationship to the test between Fonzie and the Cunninghams and see if it can survive. What if they're not living in the same building? Does the friendship still continue? And it does. We kind of needed to see what would happen between Fonzie and the Cunninghams if he weren't their tenant. So it was nice to learn that. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things we are doing?
Listeners can follow me on Blue Sky at peterbullfront.bsky.social.
They can follow me on bsky at joblevins.bsky.social. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
If we were going by airing order, next we would be covering the finale of Happy Days. But before we get to that, there are a bunch of episodes that were not aired until after the finale, even though they take place before.
See, it's all perfectly normal.
So before we cover the finale, we're going to cover those episodes. And so next week, we are going to finally meet the often mentioned, never before seen Mother Kelp in So How Was Your Weekend?
I wonder if Mother Kelp will live up to the hype. I guess we'll find out next week. So see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
I warn you, baby, from time to time, but you just wouldn't listen. Now, pay me no mind, so I'm moving on. Keep moving on. I'm rolling on. Roll on, roll on. You've broken your vow, and it's all over now, so I'm moving on. Moving on. That big 8-wheeler rolling down the track means your true love and daddy ain't coming back, cause I'm moving on. Keep moving on. I'm rolling on. You're flying too high from my little sky, so I'm moving on. Moving on. Someday, baby, when you had your play, you're gonna want your daddy, but your daddy will say, keep on moving. Keep moving on. Keep rolling on. Roll on, roll on. I'm through with you, too bad you're blue, cause I'm moving on.
And now we're going to do it with kids.